What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Alex Wilson. And the Giants, man, they're making some moves. They're getting ready for the start of the regular season. We got 2 preseason games down. We got 1 left against the New York Jets this weekend, and then we got the bye week. Then it's the regular season. But in between all that, we know cut days, waiver wire day. That's going to be some fun stuff for the Giants. Last year, we had a lot of fun covering that because the Giants were really active. They put in some waiver claims. They made a trade for Boogie Basham between week 2 and week 3 of the preseason last year. They traded for Isaiah Simmons. So maybe we're officially on trade watch right now for the Giants, Alex. There could be a move that they get done in the next few days to bring in some sort of talent that we don't have on our radar just yet. So it's going to be interesting to see and react to all of the moves that Joe Schoen might make. And he made a big one yesterday. He restructured Andrew Thomas's contract to free up over $3 million in salary cap space. And the Giants now have $18 million in salary cap space. What does that mean for this team? Will they make a move? Could they be bringing in a new defensive tackle, a new cornerback? Does that mean that a trade is coming? A signing? Is this just for the waiver wire? That's what we're going to unpack today. What this restructuring of the contract means and what the Giants could or could not do with the $18 million in salary cap space that they currently have. But before we dive into all that, make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed this episode, subscribe to the channel if you're new, ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, and comment your thoughts down below in the comment section. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, Alex, how are you doing today, my friend? I got a lot of energy. I'm really excited. Had a great time at Fanatics Fest this weekend as a member of the press, covering all that fun stuff. It was so much fun. Had to get that out there. But how are you doing today, my friend? And what are your thoughts on Andrew Thomas and that contract restructuring?
I'm doing pretty good, man. And listen, the Giants didn't really need to clear the $3.34 million from Andrew Thomas's contract. Look, a lot of people were like, oh, I didn't know if they would do this. I think they should do this, well, yada, yada, yada. Guys, they were always going to do this. Like, it was just a matter of when. Andrew Thomas is one of the key core pieces of this team. You restructure, and by the way, if you want any more indication that they really want to see what Daniel Jones does this year, they have restructured contracts to Andrew Thomas and Dexter Lawrence. They can do so to Brian Burns, and they can do so to Bobby Okereke. And the truth of the matter is they haven't touched Daniel Jones's contract, which will tell you all you need to know right now about what they think of him right now. They just don't know what he is or what he's going to do. But they restructured Andrew Thomas's contract to create another $3.34 million, as I suggested. Now they currently have $13.23 million. They had 10 mil, and that's a lot of money. Like, that's a good amount of money to go out and either acquire somebody or use it towards waiver wire claims. But here's the thing, Anthony, waiver wire claims are pretty cheap. They're like, you can get some guys that are a little bit more expensive, but for the most part, they're going to be more affordable, I think, than the usual free agency.
Yeah. I agree with you, but I just want to make the point on that the Giants could end up cutting some players with dead cap hits on the waiver wire, and that might be why they're trying to free up some cap space.
Well, you could definitely argue that. I would say this, though. Like, let's look at a guy like Trey Herndon, someone who, we're going to talk about in another episode, as someone who's certainly on the roster, like, bubble at the moment. And Trey Herndon has no guarantees for the most part. Like, he really is, if they cut him, they save basically the entire, 900 and something mil. I think it's 900 and let me look. I can literally pull it up. Okay, here it is. So they saved $985K. They have no guarantees to him. A good chunk of their players don't have any guaranteed money. A lot of the ones that have guaranteed money are draft picks from the last 2 years or so, last 3 years or so. So they're not really going to be adding that much or needing that much to cover guys that they have on that they're going to end up cutting anyway. So I think for the majority of the money, it's either going to be going towards something like you suggested, potentially a trade or a waiver wire claim. But these waiver claims are a lot of them UDFAs, some veterans on cheap contracts. Like, they're going to be lower level players. Like, there's a reason they're getting waived. That doesn't mean you can't run into some gems every now and then. Jason Pinnock being a perfect example of that. But I do think that extra bit of money does indicate more so about a trade or a free agent acquisition. Now, the free agents include Xavier Howard, Adoree Jackson, J.C. Jackson, Witherspoon. Like, there are some decent veteran corners on this free agent market still. I think the Giants would be smart to acquire one of them, at least until after roster cuts, obviously. We're going to see what happens here, but Cordell Flott has not played enough football, guys. I don't know if I trust Nick McLeod. Andrew Phillips is a rookie. We have very minimal. Trey Herndon is historically not a great player. He's given up 2 or more touchdowns in 5 consecutive years. This is not a secondary that's scaring many opposing teams. And you're now in the NFC East where you have A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, CeeDee Lamb, Terry McLaurin with a quarterback. You have good players, Jahan Dotson. There's some decent talent across this NFC East now at the receiver positions, and the Giants don't have the talent to match up with a lot of them. So they need experience, and they need it quickly. I think we've passed the point, Anthony, at least in my opinion. I thought you were right a couple weeks ago in the sense that, give these young guys a chance to step up, give them a chance to win these jobs. Unfortunately, Nick McLeod missed the first preseason game. Cordell Flott hasn't played in either. They're just not playing. Some of them are just not playing. And the ones that are struggling. Andrew Phillips didn't play last game. You need to have experienced depth. I think it's time that we go out and get a cornerback. And I think this money is going to help us do that.
No, listen, I still stand by what I said. The Giants needed to get those young guys on the field, get them developing and competing. Those were valuable reps for them. If you did sign a guy like a Stephon Gilmore, you took away a lot of those important practice reps from a guy like a Nick McLeod or Cordell Flott. But they missed a lot of those practice reps on their own just from being injured. And now we're at this point where we've seen some of these guys play on the field, and we have not seen them play well. So the Giants are in a position now where they went through the process. They did it the right way. They got the youngsters on the field. They tried their best to develop them. And they still came to the realization, or at least we have here, Alex, that they need to add more talent at cornerback. And we knew that was probably going to be the result, but you still had to go through the process and give these youngsters a chance to compete. Now that they have done that, it's time to look at your options. And the Giants do have options. Let's make that clear. Stephon Gilmore was never coming to the New York Giants, guys. Unfortunately, that's just the reality of it. As badly as we might have wanted him, he would have been a massive upgrade to this team. He didn't have any interest in coming here. It takes two to tango. And so for the Giants, now you're going to have to look at that second crop of free agent cornerbacks or get creative on the waiver wire. This is what I love about Joe Schoen. Getting creative on the waiver wire doesn't just mean making claims. This is what we've seen the last 2 years from Joe Schoen. It also means making trades. Boogie Basham Jr. was going to get cut by the Buffalo Bills. The only reason the Giants knew that is because Joe Schoen has such a great relationship with the Buffalo Bills. So before he even got cut and immediately went on the waiver wire and got claimed before the Giants could grab him, he called up Brandon Beane, he made a trade, he sent a late round conditional pick and picked up a former second rounder in Boogie Basham as edge rushing depth. And he's one of our core depth pieces on the defensive side of the ball. Expect Joe Schoen to do something similar again this summer. That's just what he loves to do. Send late round picks and just extract value from the waiver wire by trading for guys who would inevitably be cut either way. So whether you want to say the Isaiah Simmons trade is an example of this, the Boogie Basham trade, or maybe they do something this year. The Jordan Phillips trade is also an example. The Giants were going to cut him. Instead, they get a conditional 6th round pick from the Dallas Cowboys. That's a great move. Expect another one of those from Joe Schoen. But like you said, tying that into the cornerback discussion, well, who could they possibly sign or trade for? I think there are 3 former first-round cornerbacks that just have not panned out across the NFL, Alex, that the Giants could consider making a move to grab. First one I'm going to bring up here, 2021 first-round pick, top 10 overall pick, number 8 overall pick in the NFL draft, J.C. Horn from the Carolina Panthers. Now, I know what a lot of you are thinking. No, don't touch him with a 10-foot pole. He can't stay healthy. Absolutely true. You are right about that. J.C. Horn has had more problems with injuries than anybody in the NFL over the last 3 seasons. I think he's played in 22 games and he's missed 24 games. So he's missed the majority of his games in his NFL career. But coming out of college, J.C. Horn was a bona fide top 10 talent. He was sick. He had a pretty healthy 2022 season where he played 13 games. He had 2 picks. He had 7 pass defenses. He was good. When he's healthy, he's very good. And his physicality, his size, his athleticism, very similar to Deonte Banks, plus a familiarity there between Brandon Beane and Joe Schoen. He's a perfect scheme fit and perfect acquisition for the Giants this summer if he wants a change of scenery and the Panthers are deciding to move on from him. Again, because of his health questions, you can't bank on him panning out as your full-time starter there. But say you bring in J.C. Horn, Alex, for a 6th round draft pick via trade, and you pick up a veteran off the waiver wire, now you're a lot more comfortable with your cornerback room, and you have some really high upside talent in a guy like J.C. Horn. Now, some other names I'll throw out there, Greg Newsome from the Cleveland Browns, similar story, former first-round pick, hasn't panned out. Maybe he needs a change of scenery, same way J.C. Horn does. And Kaiir Elam, Buffalo Bills, former first-round pick, hasn't panned out, maybe needs a change of scenery. What's your kind of thought process on that, Alex? That idea of maybe just finding guys who haven't reached their potential, need a new home to play in. J.C. Horn being a good example, Kyer Elam, any of these guys. How do you feel about Joe Shane potentially making one of those low-risk, high-upside trades like he's done in the past 2 years?
I think that's exactly what Joe Shane should be doing. And I think that that's where you find the value. You know what I mean? You have to be proactive in finding, players like this, excuse me. So, JC Horn's a really, really solid player when he's been healthy. His grades have been fantastic. He's been solid in coverage. This is the type of guy you take a shot on. At 23 years old, the question is, are the Panthers and Dan Morgan, do they want to trade him? Because, when he's healthy, he's a very good player. But the question is, does he stay healthy? Do the Carolina Panthers, can they afford to let a guy of that caliber go? And what is it going to cost the Giants, right? He has 2 more years, including the 5th-year option. Do you think you can get him for a mid-round pick? Do you think you can get him for a 3rd-rounder? I don't know. You're probably looking more like a 2nd-rounder for him, potentially. It's possible that they're trying to offload him for less. I really just don't know what that might look like. Maybe you could try to float like a mid-rounder in Darius Slayton, give them some more receiving talent, plus that kind of guy. So I do think that if you are, Joe Shane and you're this Giants front office, you got to be looking for value anywhere you can get. Waiver wire claims are great, but again, as I said before, they're waiver wire claims for a reason, because they're not very good most of the time. 99% of the time, you're not getting starting caliber players off the waiver wire. You're getting players who have some upside, have some projectable measurables, but you're gonna have to work with these guys. You're gonna have to survive their ups and downs, their volatility. Otherwise, they'd be starting on a lot of these teams, right? So you have to weigh those options. I think that they're gonna make a waiver claim. Don't get me wrong. They might even make a waiver claim for a linebacker. That's another position I've been eyeing. Micah McFadden, he's injured. We don't know if he'll be ready by week 1. Deontay Johnson, not enough playing time and experience there. Matthew Adams, who knows? They could go after a linebacker if one shakes free. There's always some decent linebackers on the waiver wire. But, looking at other positions, I like our DT. I like Elijah Chapman. I know they just released Ryder Anderson. Still got Jordan Riley. I think we have some decent depth there. Offensive line's always a position I would be very happy to add pieces to that have upside. Bricillo does enjoy, if I said that right for the first time ever. So I know people are getting on my case. Bricillo, I think that's right. Bricillo, I've been saying. Is it Bricillo? Bricillo. Yeah, not Bricillo. Bricillo.
Yeah, Carmen Bricillo is what we've been saying, but it's Bricillo is what someone clarified in the comments.
Bricillo, yeah. Okay, that's because someone said it at a hilarious. It was like isn't that Leviosa? It's Leviosa. Hilarious comments in the YouTube channel, but in any case, adding an offensive line is always a good move for this Giants team. Always good to have depth and some high upside potential there. But secondary, as you guys know, is most important right now. This cornerback room could use all the talent they can get. I still think a free agent makes the most sense. Even bringing back Adoree Jackson, I'd be fine with. Just anyone with experience, to be honest with you. Xavier Howard obviously has a lot of experience as well. Happy with him. The trade thing, though, if you're going to go after someone, Kyer Lime, he's gotten cooked a lot. I don't know if I love Kyer Lime. I'd love JC Horn, but I feel like... has he played in these preseason games for the Panthers? That's kind of most important. Is he injured right now? He hasn't played in any preseason games.
That would be
for JC Horn on the Panthers.
Oh, you said Kyer Elam for the Bills.
Sorry. Has Horn played? He hasn't played any preseason stuff. Is he hurt again right now?
No, JC Horn recently said that he was healthy. I saw that in my research for.
So they just kept him out because they were scared of him getting hurt.
That's probably the case, but I've seen video today of J.C. Horn battling with Xavier Legette in coverage and, sticking with him on a route during practice. So, he's out there, he's practicing, he's playing, he's healthy enough. Maybe they view him as valuable enough to keep out all those preseason games, or probably more so what you're saying, they just don't want him to risk his injury during a preseason matchup.
Yeah, they probably feel as though, joint practices is enough, which is fine. But with that being said, he's their top corner right now, isn't he? He's their number one? Or did they bring in somebody else?
I don't really keep up too much with how bad of a roster the Carolina Panthers have.
For real. Not for real. But, they're a mess. They're a complete mess.
As a former top 10 pick, you expect him to be their number one cornerback at this point in his career. And again, it's pretty much just an example that I'm throwing out there with Horn. Whether Troy he wants a change of scenery, I don't know how expensive a trade for him would be. I just think that if the Giants want to find a guy with some, diminished value based on where he was in the draft a few years ago, he's not worth what he used to be because of all these injuries and his unreliability, but he still has talent and he still has potential. maybe a change of scenery unlocks that for him. But again, who knows if the Panthers would even be willing to move on from him.
Dude, the Panthers are so cooked. I mean, they have J.C. Horn and like Troy Hill. Like, that's their starting corners. I mean, J.C. Horn with the injury proneness, like, if you let him go, the thing is, if you're the Panthers and you let him go and he ends up having a good year or whatever the case might be, like, you're just gonna suck. Like, they're just gonna be really bad. Anyway, probably even with J.C. Horn, maybe they want to get more draft capital, but I mean, they're ruining Bryce Young like blatantly. Maybe he has a better year. We'll see. Don't know. Don't really care, to be honest with you. I mean, it does probably impact our draft implications next year. But you know, if they were willing to trade J.C. Horn, I would definitely be interested. I just wouldn't overspend on it. You know what I mean? I don't think I'd give a second rounder for J.C. Horn because of the injury concerns. Like, we need guys that are healthy.
God,
like,
no,
third
not a
round is the
second
most
rounder.
I think I'd give for him.
No, I mean, put it into context. If Brian Burns was a second round pick, J.C. Horn's got to be like a fourth or fifth. You know, and I'll send a fifth
Right.
for J.C. Horn personally. That's
I would say,
how I feel about it.
I would send a third for him. I mean, dude, he's a good player when he's healthy. He's a good
Yeah.
player. Like,
You know,
I take the risk
I'm
on
with
that.
you on that. I'm with you on that. And I don't think it's very high risk because you are talking about a mid-round pick. Like, most fifth-round picks that don't pan out into starters, like, those are usually where you're picking up core depth pieces or developmental starters. So you could trade a fifth-round pick, get an immediate starter in J.C. Horn. You know, injury risks and all that constant, but I don't know, it really is hypothetical trades that we're kind of spewing out here, but I just think more so the principle and the concept of sending a late round pick for a potential high upside starter.
Yeah.
That's what the Giants are going to be focusing on and what they should be doing here as the waiver wire approaches. And on top of that, they have some players that they need to cut. That's why I think they needed to free up extra cap space. What if they cut a guy like a Drew Lock? You know, just for an example. I know that they're not going to cut Drew Lock, but I just want to use that as an example because his contract is fully guaranteed, right? I think they only save like $50,000, whatever.
Yeah,
but you got to
you can't
pay
cut
that $5 million cap hit. So you can't cut him, but there might be someone else, if we take a look at the
take
Giants
it.
books here, where you cut and you take a dead cap hit. That's why Joe Shea needed to open up some more of that salary cap space.
We have two really valuable trade pieces right now. No, I wouldn't say really valuable. I'd say that are relatively valuable that we can afford to lose. I'd say Darius Slayton is one of them. And look, listen, I don't think we're going to trade him now. I think the Giants will trade him at the deadline because they want to see if they can win games first, and they kind of need him. He's like the only guy that has chemistry with Daniel Jones. And then Azeez Ojulari is an underrated trade piece. I think that he is a guy that could be a good starter for another team if he stays healthy, and if he plays well, could earn himself another contract. A team like the Panthers may be interested in a player like that. I'm not going to say he's valuable, but he is a trade piece. You know, he is something you could throw into the mix.
I do agree with you, but for me personally, I wouldn't trade Azeez Ojulari. I think
he's a good
valuable
rotational
enough
guy.
for the Giants.
For sure.
And I just think that's really important. Like the way that I value that, I value a good rotational pass rusher probably more so than I would a high upside backup offensive lineman, probably more so than I would a fringe, potential starter at corner or safety. I think that when you're talking about edge rushers and the injuries that they face and the fact that Thibodeau, as good as he is, what if he misses 5 games with an injury? You need Azeez Ojulari to step in there and replace that production for 5 weeks. And I think that, especially when you're considering how dynamic you can make a pass rush by moving Ojulari inside and outside, moving Burns around. And honestly, I just got more perspective on this when speaking with Justin Tuck in an interview that's going to be coming out tomorrow. Was talking with him, and he was giving his perspective on moving guys around the defensive line and having the ability to mix and match your pieces. Yeah, NASCAR package from Spagnuolo years ago. We all love that stuff. You can't do all that stuff unless you hold on to Azeez Ojulari. So for me personally, I get it. He is a trade candidate for the Giants.
At the deadline,
I would hold on to him.
Yeah, for sure. Another low-key piece that could be a trade option is Isaiah Hodgins. You could probably ask Allen Robinson to do that exact role. And Hodgins is a good young player with developmental upside. Like he's shown us he can be pretty solid. He might be someone you could throw into a trade as a pushover piece. That's just like someone to throw into the mix. Not very valuable, but I
got a good one. You want to hear one?
Yeah, I do.
How about Evan Neal?
I mean, that's a great one.
Former first-round pick.
He has the same issue that J.C. Horn does. Can't stay healthy.
Exactly. Someone around the league might look at him and say, the Giants just ruined this kid. I loved him at Alabama. We could fix him. The way that I feel about all my exes. Now might be the best time to
trade him before he further plummets his value in some possible way.
Yeah.
I mean, really, it's time. In this instance, it's just time, right? Like, he has 3 years of cost control play still. Like, you might value that more than what he's put on tape already or the injuries. You know what I mean? Like if you're a team like the Panthers, who I don't really know what their offensive line looks like, or the Bills, I mean, they're not good, right? They're not good. You may want to invest in a former great prospect that could be rebounding, and that new change of scenery, just shake things up. Like that could be something the Giants would consider. Now, look, I think Jermaine Illuminor is our starting right tackle for 2 years, right? Mm-hmm. What is Evan Neal's role in that time? Swing tackle? So he's our swing tackle. There's also some other players on this roster, by the way, that haven't looked so bad at tackle. So, this really does boil down to what Carmen Bricillo wants on this offensive line and where he sees the value. And Neal has none right now. He has zero value, right? Yeah. Zero. So another team may see 20% value.
Right. And I'll even throw one more name out there, Josh Azidu. Josh Azidu is kind of similar in a way where he was a former third-round pick, and Giants
panned out,
who have kind of ruined him, and he's dealt with injuries.
Is he a third-round pick?
Josh Azidu is a third-round pick.
Damn. Our third rounds, man, really bad.
It's tough because you need to start hitting on these third-round picks. And
dude, our third-round picks have been horrible. I mean, Cordell Flott's been bad for the most part.
And the thing is, with these third-round picks, the Giants expect these guys to become starters.
Not very good.
Dane Belton's a fourth-round pick, so a little different. But I hear you. But you expect those third-round picks to be starters when it's a guy like a Josh Azidu or Cordell Flott, and they just haven't been for the Giants. Mm-hmm. Other teams might look at them and say, "Oh, that was a third-round pick that I thought could have been a starter in this league. The Giants messed him up. I'm going to trade for him." And then they send the Giants a fifth-round pick. And listen, the reality is the Giants are probably entering another rebuilding year. I think Joe Schoen has made it pretty clear that he also feels that way. So shipping off some guys like an Evan Neal or a Josh Azidu or even a Cordell Flott
to get value.
Get some value before there's no value left to be had. I think Evan Neal actually does just make a ton of sense as a potential trade piece.
Playing devil's advocate though, this would be my opposing perspective. I want to see if Bricillo can fix him. Because this is a different situation. Bobby Johnson was just a cancer to everybody in that offensive line room. He just destroyed everyone's technique. They were horrible, strategically and technically. I'm curious to see if Evan Neal could turn things around. But then again, Jermaine Illuminor is my starting tackle. Is he going to take the job back from Jermaine Illuminor? That's the question. But if he gets hurt, and then you have a competent right, you never really know. Ideally, Jermaine Illuminor will lose that job and becomes your just utility man. And he's a great one at that. That's what we always wanted. But Neal obviously has been set back so much. Maybe there is, maybe they want to see what happens. But, with that being said, you can always trade Evan Neal at the deadline. If you want to gain pieces, right? If you want to add pieces, you could always look to do that at the deadline and see if he develops and he's making progress, staying healthy. It enhances his value even further. So, just something to throw out there, something to think about. I know a lot of people may, honestly, at this point, a lot of people probably will be on board with trading Evan Neal, but maybe a couple months ago we're more so no, let's give him a chance. But I'm curious to see what he could do with Carmen Bricillo, actually developing him. Now that he's showed that this team can actually operate as a unit in the offensive line specifically. That is an interesting one, though. I am curious to see what they do.
Yeah, and I think that comes down to Carmen Bricillo's take on Evan Neal's work ethic and whether or not he feels like he can develop him and if he works hard enough. And so, that's obviously behind the scenes stuff. How do the Giants still feel about Evan Neal? How does Carmen Bricillo feel about Evan Neal? These are questions that we don't have the answers to, but you do kind of go through this mental exercise of, could this guy be traded? Could this guy, become a target? How does that look? How does that take shape? And I just think that if you're trying to identify potential trade pieces for the Giants that maybe, are not your everyday talked about players like a Darius Slayton and an Azeez Ojulari, I do think that Evan Neal, there might be something there. A team might want to extract whatever little value is left over as a former first-round pick from Alabama who has kind of the ability to play more than one position on the offensive line. Just hasn't done it at a high level just yet. But it is going to be interesting, Alex. I mean, we've got this one last preseason game. I imagine Evan Neal is going to suit up for it, and I'm really curious to see how he plays because, what do we do if Evan Neal – this is kind of the last hypothetical on this, random Evan Neal tangent that we've gone on. What do we do if Evan Neal goes into that game, plays 35 snaps, has 0 pressures allowed, and a 90 PFF grade? What is the conversation around Evan Neal if that happens?
The conversation is, damn, Bricillo just saved his career.
Right.
That's the conversation. And it's but again, we get wrapped up in small samples. And we're this is going to be great. This is going to be this. And we need to just see more consistency. We need to see compounding results. Not one good game. He's back. He's alive. He's saved. We need to see 5, 6, 7, 8 games. Last year, Jermaine Illuminor gave up 28 pressures and like 6 sacks. Guys, like, want to hear the craziest thing ever? 11 of those pressures and 5 of those sacks came in 2 games. After those 2 games, I think it was week 6 and 7 or 5 and 6, he went 13 straight games without giving up a sack, right? So, like, sometimes you just have a bad game or two, and then you turn things around. Like, you need to see a larger sample here. I need to see Evan Neal playing well, taking reps, like doing it in practice before we even sniff this regular season action, unless there's injury, then he forced into a role. But listen, like, Evan Neal right now is just good depth for the Giants. That's it. That's all he is. Until he gets an opportunity to show that he can be more than that. And at that point, his value will increase, and the Giants may be better off waiting to move him if that's the decision they want to go in. That's the direction they want to go in. But at the moment, they have some tradable pieces. They have some pieces they can swap. Like, look, the receiver core, Anthony, I would argue the receivers are a strength right now. With Neighbors, Wandale, Hyatt, and Slayton, and Hodgins, I'd argue that they have a strong receiver unit. Their defensive line, I have argued they have a strong defensive line. You tried to trade from positions of strength to address positions of weakness. That's always how it's been. That's always how it's going to be. The Giants have a weak secondary, so, like, realistically, they're going to trade from the receiver, trade from the defensive line standpoint, or they're going to use draft capital, which is always valuable. The problem is the Giants can't afford to be losing talent because they aren't good enough to sustain the loss of talent. And that's where you look to the draft capital. And I think that's kind of full circle here. They probably will trade draft capital before players in the end of the day.
They could do that. They could end up trading players for draft capital. You know, it's going to get really creative. The last thing that I want to say, the last point that I really want to make here, Alex, because we just talked a lot about, like, potential trade pieces. We didn't really dive into the potential free agents who are available, but I see a lot of people in Giants Twitter saying that we need to go out there and sign Xavier Howard. Guys, please no. Just do a quick Google search of Xavier Howard. Just read about him. You're not going to want to have that guy.
It's the legal issues. I forget what happened.
They're gross. Like, I'm not even going to get into detail of, like, the allegations he's faced. But just generally speaking, that's not a guy that I personally want on the Giants. And also, taking that out of the equation, he's an old, kind of washed-up cornerback in my eyes. He's not what he used to be. Like, that's not the upgrade that the Giants need. Personally, that's how I see it. So, I know a lot of fans really want him. I'm not one of them. I'm just going to make that clear.
Dude, listen, I'm okay bringing Adoree Jackson back.
I am,
like, he's 28 years old. Like, yeah, he was bad last year, but that's because he got cooked in the slot and then got hurt. You know what I mean? Like, they killed him from the beginning of last season. They completely ruined his confidence, and then he got hurt right after. Like, what more do you want from him? You know, like, of course he was going to get burned. He was covering CeeDee Lamb in the slot, a position he's never played before, ever. He's an outside corner. He's still young, athletic, waiting for an opportunity. Like, he's experienced. I'm not gonna sit here and tell you he's a great player or even an above average player, but we just need someone that can hold their own at this point. Someone who's average, someone who, you know, understands what it's like to play in New York, and he is that guy. The question is, how did that relationship end with Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll? Does Adoree Jackson even want to come back? You know what I mean? Like, we talk about bringing guys back, you know, signing guys. Do they even want to come here? Like, that's really the problem. So we'll see what happens, but clearing, you know, full circle, $3.34 million from Andrew Thomas's contract. You don't do that unless you have plans in mind. Roster cuts coming up very soon. Obviously, we got you guys covered with all the updates there, but, you know, Anthony, I'll let you finish us off.
Happy to do so. Listen, it's been a really fun time talking for almost 30 minutes here. We kind of just went on some random tangents. That's what's so fun about this. I love, you know, once we start ramping up towards the regular season, there's just so much to talk about and so many different ideas to bounce around and just have really good productive conversations on. And for the Giants, with one preseason game left to go, they still have a lot to iron out, guys. I hate to say it. I, again, didn't get to give a lot of my thoughts and opinions on that preseason game as I was busy at Fanatics Fest this weekend, but I'm sure you guys can imagine how I feel. I'm sure you guys can imagine that I feel completely underwhelmed by that week 2 preseason performance, but that's why we have these conversations. Where can the Giants upgrade? What can they do at the waiver wire to make this team better? There's a lot that they can do, and I'm excited to see how it unfolds over the next 2 weeks because the regular season is right around the corner, and the Giants need to get off to a hot start this year. Super slow start last year, 40-point blowout versus the Cowboys. That can't happen again. They're wearing those ugly century red uniforms in week 1 versus the Vikings. They got to win in those things. Got to get that dub over the Vikings. It's not going to be easy, but they got to get off to a hot start this season. So whatever they can do, roster moves, changes that they can make between now and the start of the regular season, we'll be discussing it, we'll be speculating, we'll be having a lot of fun right here on Fireside Giants. So Make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, and comment your thoughts down below in the comment section. If you're listening to Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, we'll catch you on the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Giants.
Perfect.